They say the cruelest rejection is the one that comes wrapped in duty. The one where your mate looks you in the eyes and tells you that loving you would destroy everything he's built. I know because I lived it. My name is Moira Ashford, and this is the story of how I was cast out by the most powerful alpha in the Southern Territories, only to become the one person who could reach his silent, broken son. This is the story of how sign language became my salvation, and how one whispered word changed the fate of an entire pack. But before we dive deep into this journey, a journey of heartbreak, healing, and the kind of love that rewrites destiny, I need you to do something for me. If this story speaks to you, if you've ever felt invisible or rejected, if you've ever wondered whether your gifts matter in a world that doesn't understand them, stay until the very end. I promise you there's a twist waiting that will change everything you think you know about weakness and strength. And when you're done, tell me the city you are watching from so that I can send you a hug, because everyone who carries these kinds of wounds deserves to know they're not alone. Now let me take you back to where it all began. The lunar ceremony was supposed to be the happiest night of my life. I remember standing in the great hall of the Thornwood Pack Estate, wearing a dress the color of moonlight that my mother had sewn by hand. She'd worked on it for months, silver thread catching the candlelight, each stitch a prayer that her Omega daughter might finally find her place in a world that had always deemed us lesser. The hall was magnificent, all stone archways and ancient timber beams, with white roses cascading from every surface. 300 wolves from across the Southern Territories had gathered for Alpha King Stirling Blackwood's choosing ceremony. Stirling Blackwood. Even his name commanded respect. At 32, he was the youngest Alpha King in living memory, having united 7 fractious packs under his rule after the Great Schism. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with dark hair that curled slightly at his collar and eyes the color of aged whiskey. Every unmated she-wolf in the territories had spent weeks preparing for this night, hoping to catch his attention, to become his Luna Queen. I wasn't one of them. Oh, I'd noticed him certainly. You couldn't exist in the Southern Territories without knowing Stirling Blackwood's face. His reputation, his power. But Omegas didn't dream of Alpha Kings. We knew our place. We were the caregivers, the nurturers, the ones with gentle strength but no political value. My gift was language. I spoke 7 of them fluently and could read 3 more. I had a particular talent for communicating with those others found difficult. The elderly wolves losing their memories. The traumatized pups who'd stopped speaking. The deaf elder, Phyllis Cromwell, who'd taught me sign language over long afternoons in her garden. Her weathered hands shaping words in the air while bees hummed among her roses. When the mate bond snapped into place that night, I thought I'd imagined it. I was standing near the refreshment table, holding a glass of elderflower wine I hadn't drunk, when Stirling walked past me. Not past me. Past me because Alpha Kings don't notice Omegas at their own choosing ceremonies. But then he stopped, turned. Our eyes met across 10 feet of space crowded with other wolves, and I felt it, that golden thread of recognition, ancient and undeniable, pulling taut between us. His face went absolutely white. For 5 perfect seconds, I watched emotions cascade across those aristocratic features. Shock, wonder, joy, and then devastating horror. He walked toward me, moving through the crowd like it wasn't there. Everyone turned to watch. The whispers started immediately, a rustling like wine through dead leaves. Why is he approaching the Ashford girl? She's an Omega. Surely not. This can't be happening. Outside, he said quietly when he reached me. Now. I followed him onto the terrace, my heart hammering so hard I could feel it in my throat. The night air was cool on my flushed skin. A full moon hung heavy in the sky, bearing witness to whatever was about to unfold. You feel it, he said. It wasn't a question. Yes, I whispered. He ran a hand through his hair, pacing like a caged animal. This is. I never expected. Moira, is it? Moira Ashford. My voice was steadier than I felt. My mother serves in your household's kitchen. I know who you are. His tone was sharp, then softened. I'm sorry. I know who you are. You're the one who helped young Wesley Fairfax start communicating again after his parents died. And you care for Elder Phyllis. The fact that he knew this sent a flutter through my chest. But the horror was still there in his eyes, wrestling with something that might have been longing. Stirling, I started. Alpha King, he corrected automatically, then winced. Gods, I didn't mean. He stopped, gathering himself with visible effort, and when he spoke again, his voice carried the weight of command. I cannot accept this bond, Moira. Sorry. I'm so deeply sorry, but I cannot. The words were a physical blow. I actually stumbled back a step. The treaty with the Northern Pax depends on my mating with Alpha daughter Lavinia Hartford, he continued, each word seemingly pulled from him against his will. 3 years of negotiations. The end to a conflict that cost hundreds of lives. Peace for all the territories, contingent on a political alliance sealed by marriage. But the mate bond, I protested. I know. His voice cracked. Do you think I don't know what I'm doing? What this costs? But I'm responsible for thousands of lives, Moira. Thousands of wolves who need peace, who need stability, who need the resources and security that alliance brings. I will not, put my personal desires above their welfare. So you'll reject your true mate. The words tasted like ash. You'll reject the bond the moon goddess herself forged. His jaw clenched. I'll bear the consequences. The pain, the emptiness, the half-life. That's my burden to carry, not theirs. And what about me? I asked quietly. What about my consequences? Something broke in his expression then. He reached for me, then dropped his hand before making contact. You're so young. Only 23. The bond isn't as strong for you yet. You'll recover. In time you'll find someone else, someone who can. That's not how this works. Tears were burning in my eyes now, but I refused to let them fall. You know that's not how this works. He turned away, gripping the terrace railing so hard I heard the stone crack. I, Stirling Blackwood, Alpha King of the Southern Territories, reject you, Moira Ashford, as my mate. The words detonated in my chest like a silver bullet. I heard about rejection. Every wolf knew the stories. But hearing about pain and experiencing it are different universes. This was my ribcage cracking open, my heart exposed and raw. This was every nerve ending catching fire simultaneously. This was drowning and burning and shattering all at once. I hit my knees on the stone terrace. Through the agony, I heard him make a sound, a wounded animal sound, and knew he was suffering too. The rejection hurt both parties, though conventional wisdom said the one rejected suffered more. Right then, I couldn't imagine anyone hurting worse than I did. I'm sorry, he choked out. Moira, I accept your rejection. I forced the words past my teeth, needing to end this, needing to make it final so I could leave and fall apart in private. I, Moira Ashford, accept your rejection. The bond didn't snap, that would have been cleaner. Instead, it unraveled, slowly, golden thread dissolving into nothing, leaving a void where something precious had existed for only minutes. When I could breathe again, when I could see through the pain, I stood on shaking legs. I need to leave, I said. I need to leave the territory. You don't have to, he started. Yes, I do. I looked at him then, really looked at him, memorizing the face of the man who was my mate and not my mate, who'd chosen duty over destiny. You made your choice. Me make mine. I can't stay here, seeing you with her, watching you build a life with someone else. I won't survive it. He nodded slowly, and I saw he understood. Where will you go? Away. Had no idea where. Somewhere far from the Southern Territories. Somewhere I could hide and hurt and hopefully, eventually, heal. I'll leave tomorrow. Take this. He pulled a heavy signet ring from his finger. Solid gold, engraved with the Thornwood Pack crest. If you ever need anything at all, present this to any pack in the territories, and they'll help you. Please. I should have refused it. Pride demanded I refuse it. But I took it anyway, closing my fingers around the still warm metal, and tucked it into my pocket. Goodbye, Stirling, I said. I walked back through the hall, past the staring wolves and whispered speculation, past my mother's shocked face in the kitchen doorway, past everything I'd ever known. I went home, packed a single bag, and wrote a note explaining nothing because there was nothing I could explain that wouldn't hurt her more. And by dawn I was gone. I spent 3 years wandering. Not aimlessly, I was never aimless. But I moved from place to place, pack to pack, taking temporary positions, never staying long enough to form attachments. I worked as a translator, a teacher, a caregiver. I taught human children English in a small coastal town. I worked in a library in the mountains, organizing texts in dead languages. I helped an elderly wolf pack maintain their histories, recording stories before they were lost. The pain of the rejection faded to a constant, manageable ache. Like a badly healed broken bone that hurts when the weather changes. You learn to live with it. You learn what triggers it and how to breathe through the worst moments. You learn that you're stronger than you thought, because you survived something you were certain would kill you. I also became fluent in sign language. Not just conversant but truly fluent. I'd known the basics from Elder Phyllis, but during my wandering, I met a deaf wolf named Duncan Merriweather who taught me the nuances, the poetry possible in handshapes and movement. We spent 8 months in a small pack along the western coast, and he taught me that sign language wasn't just communication. It was art, expression, identity. "You have a gift," Duncan told me one evening. His hands quick and precise in the lamplight. "You don't just translate words. You translate meaning, emotion, context. That's rare." I didn't feel gifted. I felt broken and useful, which wasn't quite the same thing. But I learned, grew. I accepted that some wounds don't fully heal, but they transform into something you can carry. I made peace with being alone, with building a life from different pieces than the one I'd imagined. And then, 3 years and 2 months after the worst night of my life, I received a letter. It arrived at the small pack where I was temporarily staying, forwarded through a chain of my previous addresses. Heavy cream paper, sealed with black wax pressed with a crest I recognized instantly. The Thornwood pack. My hand shook as I opened it. Moira Ashford. I pray this letter finds you, though I have no right to pray for anything concerning you. I'm writing because I need help. Not for myself. I forfeited any claim to your assistance when I rejected our bond. But for my son. My son. I married Lavinia Hartford, as duty required. The alliance holds. The peace stands. 6 months into our marriage, she gave birth to a boy. Archer Blackwood. He's 2.5 years old now, and he's the light of my life and my greatest failure as a father. Archer hasn't spoken a word since birth. At first we thought he was simply slow to develop. Then we thought he was stubborn, or traumatized by something we couldn't identify. We've consulted every healer, every specialist, every elder with knowledge of such things. The consensus is that Archer is selectively mute, or perhaps entirely mute. The healers can find no physical cause. His vocal cords are intact, but he remains silent. 3 months ago Lavinia left. The loveless political marriage became unbearable for both of us, and when she'd fulfilled her duty by providing an heir, she petitioned for dissolution. I granted it. She's returned to the Northern Territories. Archer stays with me. He's a beautiful, brilliant, frustrated child who cannot express himself and has begun lashing out because of it. He breaks things, hits his caregivers, withdraws for days. I'm watching my son suffer, unable to reach him, and I'm desperate. I remember what you did for Wesley Fairfax. For Elder Phyllis. Your gift for reaching those others cannot. I'm not asking for myself. I'm asking for a 2-year-old boy who needs someone who can teach him to communicate. If you agree, I'll pay you handsomely. You'll have your own cottage on the estate. You'll never have to see me if that's what you prefer. All I ask is that you try to help my son. The ring I gave you was a promise. I'm asking you to let me keep it. Stirling Blackwood. I read the letter 4 times, hands trembling harder each time. Son. Stirling had a son. With the woman he'd chosen over me. A child born from duty instead of love. And that child was suffering. Every rational instinct screamed at me to refuse. Going back meant reopening wounds that had barely scarred over. It meant being close to Stirling again, watching him be a father to someone else's child, living on the edges of a life I'd been excluded from. A 2-year-old boy who couldn't speak, who was frustrated and frightened and needed help. A child who had no blame in his father's choices. I thought of Wesley Fairfax, the traumatized pup I'd helped years ago. How he'd learned to communicate through drawings first, then whispers, then full sentences. How his grandmother had cried with relief when her grandson finally said, "I love you" again. I thought of Elder Phyllis, patiently teaching me signs in her garden. Her face lighting up when I finally mastered a particularly complex concept. I thought of Duncan Merriweather telling me I had a gift for translating not just words but meaning. And I thought of a little boy named Archer Blackwood, locked in silence, unable to tell his father what he needed. I wrote back that same night. Come. Not for you. For him. The Thornwood estate looked exactly as I remembered and entirely different. I arrived on a gray autumn afternoon, the kind where mist clings to everything and makes the world feel muffled. A driver met me at the pack borders and drove me through familiar territory that felt alien after 3 years away. The main house still dominated the landscape, massive stone structure that was half fortress, half manor, with wings added over generations until it sprawled across the hilltop like a sleeping beast. But I wasn't taken to the main house. My cottage sat at the edge of the formal gardens, far enough from the main bustle to feel private, close enough to be accessible. It was small, perfectly proportioned, with ivy climbing one wall and a blue door that reminded me of the sea. Inside I found it furnished simply but beautifully. A bedroom with a handmade quilt, a living area with a fireplace, a kitchen with copper pots hanging from hooks, and, most telling, a study with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves and a desk positioned before a window overlooking the rose garden. Someone had stocked the bookshelves with texts on child development, selective mutism, sign language, and communication disorders. Someone had left fresh flowers on the desk and bread in the kitchen and filled the kettle so I could make tea. Someone had thought about what I'd need and tried to provide it. I unpacked my single bag and tried not to think about that someone being Stirling. That evening a soft knock came at my door. I opened it to find a middle-aged woman with kind eyes and graying hair pulled into a practical bun. Moira Ashford. I'm Constance Pritchard, head of the Alpha King's household. Welcome back. Thank you. I stepped aside to let her in. I wanted to explain the arrangements before you meet Archer tomorrow, Constance said, settling into a chair with the ease of someone comfortable anywhere. The Alpha King has been very clear that you're to be given every support. You'll work with Archer on your own schedule, using whatever methods you think best. No interference, no second-guessing. And Stirling, the Alpha King. Constance's expression softened with sympathy. He knows this is difficult. He'll stay out of your way as much as possible. Though of course, he'll want updates on Archer's progress. Of course. My throat felt tight. Moira. Constance leaned forward. I've been with this household for 30 years. I was here the night of the lunar ceremony. I know what happened. I know what it cost you both. For what it's worth, he's never stopped regretting it. Constance. I'm not asking you to forgive him or make this easier for him. I'm just saying. The boy is innocent in all this. And he needs you. Whatever else is true, that's true. I nodded, not trusting my voice. You'll meet Archer at 10 tomorrow morning in the nursery. It's on the 3rd floor, east wing, blue door. You can't miss it. After she left, I stood at my window watching darkness settle over the estate, wondering what I'd agreed to, wondering if I was strong enough for this. Had to be. For Archer. The nursery door was indeed blue, a soft sky color that seemed chosen to be calming. I knocked, my heart hammering, and Constance opened it. He's in a mood this morning, she warned quietly. Threw his breakfast porridge at his nanny. Be prepared. I stepped inside a room that was every child's dream. Toys organized in colorful bins, a reading nook with cushions, windows flooding the space with light, and walls painted with a mural of a forest scene where friendly animals peeked from behind trees. In the middle of this cheerful space sat a small boy with dark curls and eyes the color of aged whiskey. My breath caught. He looked like Stirling, unmistakably so. The same strong features in miniature, the same intensity in his gaze. But where Stirling was commanding, Archer was lost. He sat perfectly still, clutching a wooden horse, staring at nothing with an expression far too old for his face. "Archer," Constance said gently. "This is Miss Moira. She's going to spend time with you." The boy's eyes flicked to me briefly, then away. No reaction. No response. Constance touched my shoulder and left, closing the door softly. For a long moment, I simply stood there, letting Archer get used to my presence. I'd learned long ago that pushing too fast with traumatized or withdrawn children only made them retreat further. Finally I moved, not toward him but toward the toys. I selected a set of wooden blocks and sat on the floor, far enough away that he wouldn't feel crowded. I began building a simple tower, humming quietly. No response. I built another tower, this one taller, more elaborate. Let it stand for a moment, then gently knocked it down. The blocks clattered across the floor. Still nothing from Archer. I tried a different approach. I positioned myself where he could see me clearly and began signing. My hands shaped simple words. "Hello. My name, I'm happy to meet you." Nothing. But then, so slight I almost missed it. His eyes tracked my moving hands. Interest. The first flicker of connection. I kept signing, adding more. "I like your horse. What's his name?" Archer looked down at his wooden horse, then back at me. His small brow furrowed. Waited. He didn't sign back. Of course not, he didn't know sign language yet. But he watched my hands with an intensity that told me something important. He was curious, engaged, not entirely locked in his silence. "You like watching my hands move," I said aloud, also signing simultaneously. "That's okay. You don't have to do anything right now. I just wanted to show you something new." I spent the next hour simply being in the space with him, sometimes signing, sometimes talking, sometimes just sitting quietly. Toward the end, I noticed Archer had moved slightly closer. Maybe 2 feet, but it was progress. When I stood to leave, signing and saying goodbye, "See you tomorrow," Archer did something that made my heart skip. He lifted one small hand in a clumsy wave. Not a sign. Not communication yet. But acknowledgement. Connection. I walked back to my cottage with tears in my eyes. Not from sadness but from hope. This was possible. We could do this. The next 3 weeks established our pattern. I arrived at the nursery each morning at 10. At first, Archer remained withdrawn, watching but not participating. I didn't push. I simply signed and spoke simultaneously about everything. The weather, the toys, stories about my day, questions I didn't expect him to answer. Slowly, incrementally, he began to engage. First, he moved closer, from across the room to a few feet away, then to sitting beside me while I signed. Then he started imitating. Clumsily at first. His small fingers struggling to shape letters and words. I praised every attempt, no matter how imperfect. "Good try. Yes, that's right. That's the sign for more." We started with simple, practical signs. More. Mo. Please. Thank you. Oh. The fundamentals of expressing basic needs. Archer absorbed them like a desert plant drinking rain. I realized early on that his muteness wasn't defiance or trauma. It was neurology. His brain simply didn't process spoken language the way most people's did. But visual language, hand shapes and movement and facial expression, that made sense to him. That was his language, the one he'd been waiting his whole short life to learn. By week 4, we were having basic conversations. "Do you want to play with blocks?" He signed yes enthusiastically. "Which color do you like best?" He pointed to blue, then signed blue with increasing confidence. "Should we build a castle or a tower?" He considered this seriously, then signed castle, followed by an approximation of big. His nannies were astonished. Constance cried when Archer signed thank you to her after she brought him lunch. Even the stern groundskeeper, Bartholomew Fletcher, softened when Archer signed hello from the nursery window. But the Alpha King Stirling I rarely saw. True to his word, he stayed away from my lessons with Archer. I'd glimpse him sometimes, watching from a distance. His expression a mixture of wonder and something that looked like grief. But he never approached, never interfered. Until the night everything changed. I was working late in my cottage study, preparing more advanced lessons for Archer, when the knock came. Soft but insistent. I knew who it was before I opened the door. Stirling stood on my threshold, still wearing his formal alpha attire from whatever meeting he'd attended. Dark shirt, silver rings of office, hair slightly disheveled as if he'd been running his hands through it. He looked exhausted. And devastated. And hopeful all at once. "I'm sorry," he said immediately. "I know I promised to stay away. But I needed to say thank you. What you're doing for Archer. Moira, you've given him a voice." "I should never have had to," I said, the words escaping before I could stop them. "If you'd accepted our bond, I would have been there from the beginning." He would never have gone 2.5 years without language. Stirling flinched like I'd struck him. "You're right. You're absolutely right. This is another consequence of my choice. Another thing I destroyed." "That's not fair," I said wearily. "I'm not trying to come in. We shouldn't have this conversation on my doorstep." He entered hesitantly, as if he didn't believe he had the right. Which perhaps he didn't. I poured us both whiskey. I'd learned to drink it during my wandering years. And we sat on opposite sides of my small living room, the fireplace crackling between us. "Tell me about Archer," I said finally. "What was he like before I came?" Stirling's hands tightened on his glass. Frustrated. Angry. He'd scream without sound, this awful silent screaming that haunted me. He'd throw things, hit people, destroy his toys. Not because he was violent but because he was trapped. Imagine being locked in your own mind, unable to tell anyone what you need or feel or think. "I don't have to imagine it," I said quietly. "That's what rejection feels like." His eyes closed briefly. "I know. Sorry. I know that doesn't help, but I am. Why didn't you try sign language before?" "Yes. Surely someone suggested it." "They did. Multiple times. But Lavinia..." He paused, choosing words carefully. "She thought it would make him weaker. More different. She insisted we keep trying to force spoken language, that giving him an alternative would make him stop trying to speak. I disagreed, but I deferred. Keep peace. To honor the treaty. And Archer suffered for it. Where is Lavinia now?" "Northern Territories. She visits once a month for appearances. But she shows no interest in Archer beyond ensuring he's alive and well cared for. She fulfilled her duty producing an heir. Everything else." He gestured vaguely, helplessly. I felt a complex tangle of emotions. Anger at Lavinia's coldness toward an innocent child. Fury at Stirling for allowing it. Sadness for the entire broken situation. And underneath it all, that never quite healed wound of rejection throbbing with renewed pain. "Moira." Stirling leaned forward, his gaze intense. "I need to tell you something. The pain never faded. Not for me. I know it was supposed to. Everyone said rejection hurt badly at first but dulled over time. But every day for 3 years and 2 months, I felt like I'm missing half my soul. Every time I see a full moon. Every time I hear your name. Every time I watch Archer achieve something new and want to share it with someone who would truly understand." "Stop," I whispered. "I can't. I've stayed silent for 3 years, honoring your need for distance, but having you here, watching you with Archer, seeing the mother you would have been to him, should have been to him. He has a mother. He has a woman who gave birth to him. You're the one mothering him. You're the one who saw what he needed and gave it to him without hesitation. You're the one he reaches for now when he's upset. Do you know he started signing Moira When he wakes up in the morning? You're the first person he asks for. My heart cracked a little wider. That's just because I'm teaching him. It's not. It's everything, Stirling interrupted. And I know I have no right to ask anything of you. I know what I took from us. But Moira, if there's any chance, any possibility that you could forgive me. Forgive you for what? I stood abruptly, needing space. For choosing your people over your mate. That's not unforgivable, Stirling. It's admirable. Heartbreaking but admirable. You did what you thought was right. Then why do you sound so angry? Because you gave me hope. The words burst out of me. For 5 perfect seconds in that terrace, I had everything I'd ever wanted. Mate. Future. Someone who saw me, not just another Omega but me. And then you took it away and I had to learn to live without it, and I did. I survived. Built a life. And now you're asking me to what? Try again. Risk it again. I'm not asking you to risk anything, Stirling said, standing too. The rejection can't be undone. The bond is broken. I know that. I'm just asking. Can we try to build something new? Not mates, but partners in raising Archer. Friends, maybe, eventually. I don't know if I can be your friend, I said honestly. I don't know if I'm strong enough to watch you live a life I'll never be part of and smile through it. Then tell me what you need. Whatever it is, I'll do it. Space, I said immediately. Boundaries. A clear understanding that I'm here for Archer, not for you. Not for us. He nodded slowly, each nod a visible effort. I can do that. And Stirling. I met his eyes. Don't ever ask me to forgive you again. You made your choice. I've made mine. Let's leave it there. All right, he said quietly. I'm sorry. For this, for everything. He left, and I stood in my cottage watching the fire burn down, wondering if I just made things better or infinitely worse. 2 weeks later, on a crisp morning with frost on the windows, Archer had his breakthrough. We were working on more complex emotions. Signs for happy, sad, scared, angry. Archer was getting frustrated trying to distinguish between scared and worried, which used similar hand shapes. His small face scrunched with concentration and irritation. I signed, it's okay to be confused. Learning new things is hard. He signed back, clumsily but clearly, you help me. Thank you. And then, before I could respond, he did something I'd been teaching him for weeks but he'd never attempted. He spelled my name, fire. But he didn't stop there. His small hands formed another sign. One I'd taught him yesterday when we were discussing family relationships. One he shouldn't have connected to me. The sign for mother. Aura. My breath stopped. Archer, I said carefully, also signing. I'm not your mom, sweetheart. I'm your teacher. Your friend. He shook his head stubbornly, signing again with more emphasis. You. Before I could respond, the nursery door opened. Stirling stood there, and from his face, I knew he'd been watching through the crack in the door. Had seen and heard everything. Archer, he said, his voice rough. He crossed the room and knelt beside his son. You spoke. We both froze. Because Archer hadn't just signed. In that moment of emphasis, trying to make me understand, he'd whispered. One word. Barely audible, but undeniably spoken. Mom. The word hung in the air like a miracle. Stirling's eyes flew to mine, wide with shock and something deeper. Hope, joy, disbelief. Archer looked between us, confused by our reactions. Then he did it again, louder this time. Mom. His first word. After 2.5 years of silence, the first word Archer Blackwood spoke aloud was identifying me as his mother. I started crying. I couldn't help it. Tears streamed down my face as I pulled Archer into my arms, holding him close while he patted my shoulder awkwardly, the way toddlers do when they're not quite sure what's happening but know something important is. Yes, I whispered. Yes, baby. I'm here. I'm here. Stirling was crying too. Silent tears tracking down his face as he watched his son speak for the first time, watched him claim me, watched everything he'd broken and couldn't fix begin to heal in the most unexpected way. News of Archer's first word spread through the estate like wildfire. By evening, everyone knew that the young Alpha heir had spoken, and that his first word was claiming his teacher as his mother. The whispers started immediately, variations on the same theme. Isn't that inappropriate? The Alpha King should put a stop to this. That Omega is overstepping. Poor Lavinia. Constance Pritchard, bless her, shut down gossip in the main house with characteristic efficiency. But she also came to my cottage that evening with a warning. Lavinia's heard, she said. She's traveling back from the Northern Territories. She'll be here tomorrow. She has every right to be upset, I said, though my stomach churned. I never meant to replace her. I never meant for Archer to. Moira, that woman abandoned her son emotionally months before she physically left. Don't apologize for giving Archer what she wouldn't. It's still complicated. Everything about this situation is complicated, Constance agreed. But that little boy finally spoke, and his first word was calling you his mother. That means something. Don't let anyone make you feel guilty for it. Easier said than done. That night I lay awake worrying. I'd come to help Archer communicate, not to replace his mother. I'd set boundaries with Stirling, insisted I was here for the boy, not for any complicated feelings about what might have been. But how did you maintain those boundaries when a 2-year-old had decided you were his mother and spoken his first word to claim you? And how did you explain to your heart that it needed to stop expanding with love for a child who wasn't yours? Lavinia Hartford arrived at noon the next day in a carriage emblazoned with the Northern Territories crest. I watched from my cottage window as she stepped down. Tall, elegant, with pale blonde hair and the kind of beauty that looked carved from ice. She wore traveling clothes that probably cost more than everything I owned, and she moved with the confidence of someone who'd never been told no. I waited for the summons I knew would come. It arrived an hour later. Constance at my door, her face carefully neutral. The Alpha King requests your presence in his study. Lavinia Hartford is with him. My hands trembled as I changed into my most professional dress. Deep green wool, simple but well made. I braided my hair back severely and wore no jewelry except the thin silver chain my mother had given me years ago. Armor. All of it armor. The Alpha King's study was on the second floor, a room I'd never entered. When Constance showed me in, I found it exactly as I'd imagined. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, massive oak desk, windows overlooking the estate, and the lingering scent of leather and old paper. Stirling stood near the window. Lavinia sat in one of the leather chairs, her posture perfect, her expression arctic. Miss Ashford, she said, not rising. How convenient that you've inserted yourself into my son's life. Lavinia, Stirling said warningly. She ignored him, her cold blue eyes fixed on me. I hear Archer's first word was calling you his mother. How? Interesting. I never encouraged. I started. Didn't you? She stood now, and I realized she was taller than me by several inches. She used the height advantage deliberately, looking down at me. You come here, the rejected Omega who never got over my husband, and you latch onto his son. That's enough, Stirling interrupted, his voice carrying alpha command. But Lavinia wasn't finished. Everyone knows what you are to each other. Everyone knows he rejected you for me, for duty, for the good of all the territories. And now you're taking revenge by stealing his son's affection. I'm teaching him to communicate, I said, keeping my voice steady through sheer force of will. Nothing more. Really. Because my sources tell me Archer cries for you when you leave. That he signs your name constantly. That he refuses to let anyone else comfort him when he's upset. That sounds like rather more than teaching, Miss Ashford. Your sources, I said slowly, might also tell you that your son suffered for 2.5 years because no one, including you, gave him the tools he needed to express himself. I did that. I gave him language. If he's attached to me, it's because I see him, not as a political inconvenience or a duty fulfilled, but as a child who needed help. The room went very quiet. Lavinia's face flushed with anger. How dare you? No, Stirling said, moving to stand beside me. Not touching, but close enough to be clearly in solidarity. How dare you, Lavinia? You abandoned Archer months before you officially left. You showed no interest in his muteness except to see it as a defect, an embarrassment. Moira came here and gave our son a voice. If he loves her for that, he's showing excellent judgment. Our son, Lavinia repeated. Interesting. Because I've heard rumors that you're planning to officially declare her his mother. To legitimize this situation. I've made no such plans, Stirling said. But I won't apologize for Archer loving someone who genuinely cares for him. Lavinia turned her icy gaze back to me. You think you've won something, don't you? You think because a confused toddler calls you Mom, that you've replaced me, that you've somehow gotten what you wanted despite the rejection. I don't want your life, I said quietly. I don't want your title or your position or your gilded cage. I came here to help a child. That's all. Then why are you still here? If it's just a job, surely you could teach him the basics and leave. Let actual family take over. Because he's not done learning, I said. And because I stopped, but we all knew what I'd been about to say. 'Cause I love him. Lavinia smiled coldly. Of course you do. How very convenient. Tell me, Miss Ashford, when you imagine your future here, do you picture yourself as just the teacher? Or do you have more ambitious plans? Lavinia, enough, Stirling growled. No, I want to hear her answer. Are you planning to seduce my husband now that you've won over our son? Is that the end game? Poor rejected Omega finally gets her Alpha King through the back door. Something inside me snapped. I'd spent 3 years being quiet, being accommodating, accepting my place. I'd come back here and swallowed my pain and set boundaries and done everything right. And this woman who'd abandoned her child emotionally and treated him like an inconvenience, was accusing me of manipulation. I could never seduce Stirling, I said, my voice ice cold. Because we're not mates anymore. He rejected me, remember? That's done. Final. There's no magical rekindling, no romance novel ending. I work here. Teach Archer. And if he loves me, it's because love isn't a finite resource that runs out if you give it to more than one person. He can love me and you. He can call me Mom and still know you're his biological mother. Unless you're so insecure in your relationship with him that you can't handle him caring about anyone else. How dare? I dare because I'm here every day, I continued, the words pouring out now. I'm here when he wakes up frightened from nightmares. I'm here teaching him the words for his emotions so he doesn't have to scream silently anymore. I'm here celebrating every tiny victory and holding him through every frustration. Where are you? Visiting once a month for appearances. Sending gifts to assuage your guilt. That's not mothering, Lavinia. That's the bare minimum. The silence after my outburst was deafening. Lavinia stared at me like I'd slapped her. Stirling looked torn between pride and concern. And I realized with dawning horror that I'd just destroyed any chance of this situation being civil. I think, Lavinia said finally, her voice shaking with rage, that we need to discuss Archer's future more seriously. Perhaps it's time I took him back to the Northern Territories with me. Clearly the environment here is confusing for him. You're not taking my son anywhere, Stirling said, Alpha command flooding his voice with power. Our son, Lavinia corrected. And I have legal rights. You dissolved our bond, Stirling interrupted. Part of that agreement specified that Archer would remain in the Southern Territories under my primary care. You signed those documents, Lavinia. Don't threaten me with custody when you legally have none. For a moment I thought Lavinia might actually attack him. Her hands clenched into fists, her breathing rapid. Instead she turned back to me. You think you've won. You haven't. I'll make sure of it. She swept from the room, leaving a wake of expensive perfume and barely contained fury. I sagged against the desk, suddenly exhausted. I'm sorry, Stirling said quietly. I should have handled that better. I should have protected you from. I can protect myself, I said. But Stirling, I meant what I said. I'm not trying to replace her. I never wanted this to become so complicated. I know. He moved closer, then seemed to remember my boundaries and stopped. But Moira, you have to understand. Archer choosing you as his mother? That wasn't manipulation. That was a child recognizing safety and love and claiming it. You can't apologize for that. What if she's right, though? I looked up at him. What if I am overstepping? What if my being here is making things worse? You gave my son a voice, Stirling said fiercely. You gave him the ability to express himself, to connect with the world. If that's overstepping, then overstep as much as you want. It's not that simple, isn't it? Archer is happy for the first time in his life. He's learning, growing, communicating. Whatever else is complicated, that's simple and true. I wanted to believe him. But Lavinia's accusations echoed in my head. Poor rejected Omega finally gets her Alpha King through the back door. Was there truth in that? Had some part of me been drawn to Archer because he was Stirling's son? Had I been using the boy as a way to remain connected to the man who rejected me? I need to think, I said. I need time to figure out what's right here. Don't leave, Stirling said immediately. Please, Moira. Whatever you're thinking, don't leave Archer. He needs you. I won't leave, I promised. Not without warning, not without making sure he's cared for. But I need to be honest with myself about why I'm really here. I spent that night walking the estate grounds, thinking. The moon was nearly full, hanging heavy in the sky like a reminder of the bond that had been and could never be again. The gardens were beautiful even in autumn, with late-blooming roses and the last of the lavender still scenting the air. I thought about Lavinia's accusations, about my motivations, about what I felt for Archer and whether it was pure or complicated by unresolved feelings for his father. The truth was messy. Yes, part of me had been drawn to help Archer because he was Stirling's son. How could I not be? The child was half made from the man I'd been mated to, the man I'd loved for 5 seconds before losing him forever. Looking at Archer's face was looking at a shadow of what might have been. The love I felt for that little boy was entirely his own. I loved the way he concentrated so seriously when learning new signs. I loved his laugh when we played hiding games. I loved how he'd started bringing me flowers from the garden. Wildflowers mostly, half crushed from his small fist. I loved the weight of him when he climbed into my lap for stories. I loved him not because of who his father was but because of who he was. A bright, frustrated, brilliant child who'd been trapped in silence and was now discovering the joy of expression. If I left now, I'd hurt him. He'd already lost one mother figure in Lavinia. Losing another would teach him that people who claim to care about him eventually leave. That love was conditional and temporary. I couldn't do that to him. But I also couldn't ignore the complications. Stirling's obvious lingering feelings. My own confused emotions. The way being near him still hurt, like pressing on a bruise to see if it still aches. Pax gossip. Lavinia's fury. I was so deep in thought that I didn't hear the footsteps behind me until a small voice said, "Moira." I spun to find Archer standing on the garden path in his nightshirt, bare feet on the cold stone, clutching his wooden horse. "Archer!" I rushed to him, signing even as I spoke. "What are you doing out here? It's the middle of the night." He signed back, his small hands quick with urgency, scared. "Looking for you." "Oh, sweetheart." I knelt to his level, pulling him close. His small body was cold from the night air. "I'm here. I'm right here. Don't leave," he signed against my shoulder. "Please don't leave." My heart cracked completely. "How did you even know to find me here?" "Sign. Watched from window. Saw you walking. Came to find you." A 2-year-old who couldn't speak had escaped his nursery, navigated the house and grounds, and tracked me down in the gardens because he was afraid I was leaving. "Archer," I signed, making sure he could see my hands clearly in the moonlight. "I'm not leaving you. Promise. You understand. I'm staying. Promise." His little face was so serious, so worried. "I promise. On the moon, on the stars, on everything that's true. I'm staying. He hugged me then, his small arms tight around my neck, and whispered against my ear. Mom! That second whispered word broke me and remade me simultaneously. Yes, I whispered back. Yes, baby. I'm your mom. Not his biological mother. Not replacing Lavinia. But his mother in all the ways that mattered. The one who showed up, who understood him, who loved him unconditionally. I carried him back to the house. His small head heavy on my shoulder, already half asleep. When I reached the nursery, I found it in chaos. Nurses frantically searching, Constance coordinating, and Stirling standing in the middle of it all, looking devastated. I found him, I said quietly. Every head turned. Stirling crossed the room in 3 strides. Where was he? How did he? Looking for me in the gardens, I said. He was afraid I was leaving. Stirling's eyes closed briefly. Because of this afternoon. Because of what Lavinia said. He nodded. Moira, he started. Put him to bed, I interrupted. We can talk about this tomorrow. But Archer, stirring in my arms, had other ideas. He signed something that made Stirling's breath catch. Both of you, please. He wanted both of us to put him to bed. After a moment's hesitation, we did. Stirling took one side of Archer's small bed, I took the other, and we sat with him between us. I signed him a story about a brave little horse who went on adventures, and Stirling translated it into spoken words. His voice soft and steady. Archer watched us both with something like contentment. His small hand holding mine on one side, grasping his father's shirt on the other. When he finally drifted off, Stirling and I sat in the half-dark nursery, neither of us quite willing to break the moment. He called you Mom again, Stirling said finally. I know. And you called yourself his mom. I know. Moira, what does this mean? For us, for this situation, for? It means, I said carefully, that I love your son. That I'm committed to being in his life, whatever form that takes. It means I can't leave, even when things are complicated. Even when Lavinia makes threats or the pack gossips or my own heart is confused. And us. His voice was barely audible. I looked at him across Archer's sleeping form. In the dim light, I could see the hope and fear warring in his expression. The same conflict I felt. There is no us, Stirling. You made sure of that 3 years ago. I know I did. But nothing. We're Archer's parents. Both of us, in whatever configuration makes sense. That's all we can be. Is it? He reached across Archer, careful not to wake him, and his fingers barely brushed mine. The touch sent electricity through me, phantom echoes of a bond that no longer existed. Because I still feel it, Moira. Not the mate bond that's gone, but something else. Something that's been growing since you came back. Don't, I whispered. Why not? We're both free now. Lavinia and I dissolved our bond. The treaty is secure. The alliance holds regardless. There's no political barrier anymore. Except that you rejected me, I said, pulling my hand away. Except that I spent 3 years putting myself back together. Except that I'm not sure I could survive it if you changed your mind again. I wouldn't. You don't know that. You can't promise that. I stood needing distance. What happens if the northern packs demand a new alliance? If some other political crisis requires you to bond with someone else? Will you reject me again? Because I can't, Stirling. I can't do that twice. He stood too, careful not to disturb Archer. You're right. I can't promise nothing will ever require me to choose between personal desire and duty. But I can promise that if I ever have to make that choice again, I'll make a different one. I learned, God's Moira, I learned what that cost. I won't repeat that mistake. Pretty words, I said. But words are easy in the middle of the night when emotions are high. Tomorrow in daylight when reality returns, you might feel differently. Then let me prove it. However long it takes, let me prove I mean this. I looked back at Archer, sleeping peacefully between where we'd been sitting. He looks so young, so vulnerable, so dependent on both of us. I can't think about this right now, I said. Everything is too tangled. Archer needs stability, not more chaos. Agreed, Stirling said. So let's table the complicated feelings. Focus on him. And if, over time, something else develops naturally between us, we'll deal with it then. No pressure. No expectations. It was reasonable. Sure. Exactly the right approach. So why did it feel like giving up something precious? All right, I agreed. For now, we're just co-parents. Nothing more. Nothing more, he echoed. But when we left the nursery together, walking down the quiet hallway, his hand brushed mine again. And neither of us moved away. The next 3 months fell into a pattern that felt almost domestic. I worked with Archer every morning, expanding his sign vocabulary, introducing written words, even beginning to experiment with spoken language. He'd said "Mom" twice now, and I wondered if he might have more verbal language capacity than we'd thought. Perhaps he just needed to feel safe enough to use it. We discovered he could make sounds. Small ones at first, humming while he played, little exclamations of joy or frustration. The healers were fascinated, revising their diagnoses. Perhaps not entirely mute, they concluded. Perhaps selectively verbal, with sign language as his primary communication method and speech as a secondary option when he felt particularly comfortable. Stirling joined our lessons sometimes, not to interfere but to learn. He studied sign language with the same intensity he applied to everything, and within weeks he was conversational. Watching him sign with Archer, seeing their hands move together, their faces animated with communication, it did something to my heart I couldn't quite name. We fell into routines. Breakfast together in the nursery sometimes, the three of us. Afternoon walks in the gardens where Archer would sign excitedly about birds and flowers and the groundskeeper's grumpy cat. Evening story time where Stirling and I took turns. Me signing, him speaking, creating a full sensory experience for Archer. The pack noticed, of course. The gossip evolved from scandalous to curious to something almost approving. Elder Phyllis, my old teacher who I visited weekly now, summed it up best. "You've made a family from broken pieces," she signed during one of our tea times. Not traditional, not what anyone expected, but real and loving. That's what matters. Lavinia visited once more during those 3 months. The meeting was coldly civil. She spent exactly 2 hours with Archer, brought expensive gifts he barely noticed, and left with barely concealed relief. Before departing, she pulled me aside. "I don't like this," she said bluntly. "But I'm not stupid enough to disrupt a situation that's clearly working for my son. So you win, Miss Ashford. You've become his mother. I hope you're satisfied." "This was never about winning," I said quietly. "And the door is always open if you want to genuinely be part of his life." She laughed bitterly. "I was never meant to be anyone's mother. The northern packs needed an alliance. The southern territories needed peace. Stirling needed an heir. I fulfilled my function. That's all it ever was." "That doesn't have to be all it is," I said. But she was already leaving, already retreating back into the political world she understood, away from the messy emotions of motherhood she didn't. I felt sorry for her, and grateful, because her emotional absence had created space for me to step in, to love this child who needed loving so desperately. But the situation with Stirling grew more complicated. We were careful around each other. Professional. Appropriate. But there were moments, small ones, where something deeper surfaced. The time Archer fell and scraped his knee, and we both reached to comfort him, our hands tangling together over his small back. The evening Stirling found me crying in my cottage after a particularly frustrating day, and he held me without saying anything, just steady presence until I could breathe again. The night we got Archer to sleep after he'd been sick with fever, and we stood outside his nursery door, exhausted and relieved, and Stirling said, "We make a good team," and the weight of those words hung between us. The morning I turned to find Stirling watching me with an expression so tender it made my breath catch, before he quickly looked away. We were falling toward something. Both of us knew it. Neither of us acknowledged it. Until the night of the Winter Festival. The Winter Festival was Thornwood Pack's biggest celebration, a week of feasting, games, music, and ceremonies honoring the longest night of the year. The estate transformed into something magical. Lights strung through every tree, tables laden with food, wolves from neighboring packs arriving to join the festivities. Archer was beside himself with excitement. He'd never experienced a winter festival before. Last year he'd been too young, too trapped in his silence to truly participate. This year he signed questions about everything. What are the lights for? Can I try the honey cakes? Will there be music? On the festival's main night, there was a grand ball in the Great Hall. I dressed carefully. A deep blue gown that Constance had insisted I accept, with silver embroidery at the hem and sleeves. It was the finest thing I'd ever worn. When I arrived at the hall with Archer's hand in mine, he'd refused to let anyone else escort him. The room fell briefly quiet. Then Stirling was there, moving through the crowd toward us, and I understood the silence. He looked devastating. Formal alpha attire, but something in his expression as he looked at me made my heart stutter. "Miss Ashford," he said formally, then dropped the formality. "Moira, you look pretty." Archer signed enthusiastically. "Moira pretty. Like stars." Several nearby wolves who'd been learning basic signs to communicate with their young alpha translated for those who didn't understand, and laughter rippled through the crowd. "Yes," Stirling said softly, his eyes not leaving my face. "Exactly like stars." The evening unfolded like something from a dream. We watched Archer delight in everything. The food, the music, the other pups he could now communicate with through the basic signs they'd all been learning. The pack had embraced sign language as a way to include their young alpha, and watching children of various ages signing to each other warmed something deep in my chest. As the evening progressed, traditional dances began. Couples swirling across the floor in patterns passed down through generations. "Miss Ashford," a voice said behind me. I turned to find Marcus Thornton, one of the pack's senior warriors. "Would you honor me with a dance?" Before I could answer, Stirling appeared at my elbow. "I'm afraid Miss Ashford has already promised this dance to me," he said smoothly. I hadn't, but I didn't contradict him. Marcus bowed and retreated, and Stirling offered his hand. "Dance with me, Stirling." One dance. Nothing scandalous. Just two co-parents enjoying a festival. I took his hand. He led me onto the floor, and suddenly we were in the midst of other dancing couples. His hand at my waist, mine on his shoulder, our other hands clasped between us. The music was something slow and ancient, a melody older than any of us. "You've caused quite a stir tonight," Stirling said as we moved. "Half the pack is placing bets on when I'll officially court you." "That's inappropriate." "Is it?" He spun me gently. "Moira, we've been dancing around each other for months. Literally and figuratively. We agreed to focus on Archer. And we have. But Archer is thriving. Happy. Communicating. At what point do we acknowledge that there's something here between us?" "There can't be," I said, but my voice lacked conviction. "Why not? Give me one good reason." "You rejected me. 3 years ago. In a completely different situation. When I thought I had no choice. You might have to make that choice again." "I won't. I swear to you, Moira, I won't." "You can't know that." "I can." He pulled me slightly closer, his voice dropping so only I could hear. "Because I love you. I loved you then, I loved you through every day of the last 3 years, and I love you now. Not just as Archer's mother. Not just as someone who saved my son. But as you. As Moira. As the woman who's brave and kind and fierce, and who taught me that duty means nothing if you sacrifice every human connection to fulfill it." I missed a step. His arm tightened, keeping me upright. "Don't," I whispered. "Don't say things like that." "Why not?" "It's true." "Because I can't, I don't." I stopped fighting for words. "I don't know if I can trust this, Stirling. I don't know if I'm strong enough to risk it again." "Then don't risk everything at once," he said. "Risk a little. Let me court you properly. Let me prove this is real, that I mean it, that I've learned from my mistakes. If at any point you want to stop, we stop. No pressure. No expectations. And Archer knows we care about each other. Has probably known for months. Children are perceptive that way. But we don't change anything with him until you're ready, until you're certain. The music was ending. Our dance finishing. But I didn't want to let go. One chance, I heard myself say. You get one chance to prove this is different. That you're different. That we could be something real. His face transformed. Hope and joy and relief all at once. Thank you. Moira, I swear I won't waste it. See that you don't, I said, trying for stern but landing closer to hopeful. As we left the dance floor, I felt eyes on us. Pack watching. Speculating. Some approving, some uncertain. But I found I didn't care as much as I thought I would. Then I heard Archer's voice. His small, rarely used spoken voice, carrying across the hall. Mom. Mpa. Come see. Mpa. He'd never called Stirling that before. Always signed father or dad, but never the informal, affectionate papa. We hurried to where he stood near the dessert table, pointing excitedly at an elaborate sugar sculpture of a wolf howling at the moon. But it wasn't the sculpture that mattered. It was hearing him speak two words in the same sentence. Hearing him claim us both, verbally, publicly. Stirling knelt beside him. What is it, Archer? Pretty, Archer said, then signed for additional emphasis. Beautiful. Like our family. Family. Not my teachers. Not my caregivers. Family. Stirling looked at me over Archer's head. His expression asking a question I wasn't quite ready to answer. But I nodded. Slightly. Enough. Stirling courted me the old way. With patience, intention, and gestures both grand and subtle. Flowers appeared on my cottage doorstep each morning. Not expensive hothouse roses but wildflowers from the estate grounds, the kind Archer and I had admired on our walks. A small note always accompanied them. Saw these and thought of you. Books appeared in my study. First editions of texts I'd mentioned wanting to read, linguistic treatises, poetry collections. He learned my routines and found small ways to be part of them without intruding. Morning tea before my lessons with Archer. He'd ensure the kitchen sent my favorite blend. Afternoon walks. He'd join us sometimes or wave from a distance and let us have space. Evening story time. He'd add his voice when invited, disappear gracefully when not. He consulted me on pack decisions that affected education and communication accessibility. Asked my opinion on expanding sign language training to the entire pack. Made it clear to everyone that my voice mattered, that my insights were valued. And crucially, he was patient. No pushing. No pressure. When I had bad days, when the phantom pain of rejection flared, when I pulled away when I needed space, he gave it without complaint. Take your time, he told me once, a month into the courtship. I've already lost you once through impatience. I won't make that mistake again. I started to believe him. Small things convinced me. The way he handled pack disputes with more nuance than before, considering emotional impacts alongside political necessity. The way he'd restructured his schedule to spend more time with Archer, being present instead of just providing. The way he looked at me, like I was precious, like I was chosen, like I was exactly what he wanted instead of a complication he'd managed. 3 months into the official courtship, he asked me to dinner. Just us, no Archer. Are you sure? Yes. We've never. It's always been with Archer as buffer. I want time with just you, Stirling said simply. To talk to you, know you, court the woman as well as the mother. So I dressed carefully. Emerald green this time with my hair loose, and met him in the small private dining room off the main hall. He'd set it beautifully. Candles, simple food, a fire crackling in the hearth. No servants hovering. Just us. Tell me about your 3 years, he said as we ate. I know where you went geographically. But tell me about you. Who you became. So I did. I told him about the places I'd seen, the people I'd helped, the languages I'd learned. The loneliness and the freedom and the slow, painful healing. The way I'd discovered strength I didn't know I possessed. He listened like every word mattered. Then he told me about his 3 years. The hollow marriage. The political victories that felt empty. Watching Archer suffer and feeling helpless. The way he'd thought about me constantly. Wondering where I was if I was happy if I ever thought of him. I kept that signet ring, I admitted. The one you gave me that night. I should have thrown it away, but I couldn't. I'm glad you didn't. Did you ever need to use it? Once. When a coastal pack wasn't going to help me because I was a lone Omega with no affiliation. I showed them the ring, and their entire attitude changed. Pause. It felt like carrying a piece of you with me. Even when I was angry at you, even when I was hurt, I kept it close. His hand found mine across the table. Moira, may I tell you something? Of course. The bond is gone. I broke it and it can't be remade. But what I feel for you now, it's not less. It's different, but it's not less. It's chosen instead of fated. Choose you. Every day. Every moment. Not because the moon goddess decreed it, but because you're brave and brilliant and kind and you love my son and you challenged me to be better. Because when I imagine my future, you're in it. Always. Tears pricked my eyes. That's a beautiful thing to say. It's true. And I need you to know, if you choose me back, if we build something together, it won't be perfect. I'll make mistakes. I'll have moments where duty conflicts with desire. But I swear to you, I'll never again choose duty over the people I love. The peace matters. Pack matters. But you matter more. Archer matters more. Us matters more. How can you promise that? What if there's another impossible situation? Then we face it together, he said simply. We figure it out together. We don't sacrifice each other for some abstract greater good. We find a different way. I wanted to believe him. Gods, I wanted to. I'm scared, I admitted. I'm terrified this will end the same way. That I'll let myself love you completely, and you'll break my heart again. I know. I'm terrified too. But Moira, I'd rather be terrified together than safe and separate. I looked at our joined hands. At this man who'd broken my heart and spent the last months earning it back piece by piece. At the future he was offering. Uncertain, complex, but real. Okay, I whispered. Okay. I choose you too. Not because of who you were to me 3 years ago. But because of who you've been these last months. Because you've shown me that people can change. That mistakes don't have to define us forever. He stood, pulling me up with him, and then we were kissing. Soft and careful at first, then deeper like finding home after a long journey. It wasn't the mate bond. That had been fire and lightning and inevitability. This was choice. Intention. Two broken people deciding to try, to build, to hope. It was better. Part 13, the challenge. We might have continued like that forever. Happy, careful, building our unconventional family one day at a time. But of course nothing stays simple for long. The challenge came from an unexpected quarter. Elder Council member Reginald Hawthorne had never approved of our arrangement. He was old guard, 70-something, traditional to his bones, convinced that proper hierarchy and bloodlines were what kept packs strong. He'd tolerated my presence because Archer's improvement was undeniable. But he'd never liked it. And when Stirling announced his intention to formally bond with me, not a mate bond, which was impossible, but a chosen bond, legally recognized and permanent, Reginald objected. Loudly. The council meeting where it happened was supposed to be routine. Stirling had invited me to observe, wanting me to understand pack governance since I'd be Luna. I sat in the back trying to be invisible. Absolutely not, Reginald's voice boomed through the chamber. An Alpha King cannot bond with a rejected Omega. The precedent it sets is dangerous. The precedent, Stirling said with deadly calm, is that leaders are allowed to grow, learn, and correct past mistakes. You speak of mistakes as if your rejection of the woman was an error. It wasn't. It was duty. It was proper. It secured peace for the entire territory. And now you want to undo that wisdom for what? Love. He said the word like it was distasteful. Alpha Kings don't have the luxury of choosing love over duty. I chose duty once, Stirling said. It nearly destroyed my son, cost me 3 years with my true mate, and taught me that duty without compassion is tyranny. I won't make that mistake again. Your son, Reginald continued, is thriving under Miss Ashford's care. No one disputes that. But there's a vast difference between employing a talented teacher and making her Luna Queen. She has no political training, no alliance to offer, no strategic value. Careful, Stirling's voice dropped dangerously low. You're speaking about the woman I love and the mother of my child. She's not the mother of your child, Reginald said. Lavinia Hartford bore your son. Miss Ashford is a glorified nanny who's overstepped. Understood. Couldn't help it. Every head in the council chamber turned toward me. Forgive me, I said, my voice steady despite my hammering heart. But I think I should have a voice in a discussion about my value. Stirling started to object, probably to protect me, but I caught his eye and shook my head slightly. Let me fight this battle. He nodded, trusting me. I walked forward, stopping before the semicircle of council members. 12 of the most powerful wolves in the Southern Territories, all staring at me with varying degrees of curiosity, sympathy, and hostility. Elder Hawthorne, I addressed him directly. You're right that I have no political training, no alliance to offer, no traditional qualifications for Luna. You're also right that I'm not Archer's biological mother. Reginald looked smugly satisfied. But, I continued, I gave your future Alpha King a voice. I taught him to communicate, to express himself, to connect with the world. Under my care, he went from a frustrated, silent child to a happy, expressive boy who can now speak, sign, and participate in pack life. That's not glorified babysitting. That's transformative education. Admirable, Reginald conceded grudgingly. But hardly qualifications for Luna Queen. Perhaps we should reconsider what qualifications matter, I said. Traditional Lunas brought alliances, yes. Political connections. But what has that gotten us? A treaty purchased with a loveless marriage that ended in dissolution within 3 years. A child born to a mother who felt no connection to him. Stability built on everyone's unhappiness. Murmurs rippled through the council. I'm not a politician, I continued. But I understand communication. I speak 7 languages fluently. I can negotiate between parties who can't understand each other, literally and figuratively. I've worked with wolves from every level of pack society, from alphas to omegas. I see people others overlook. I solve problems others ignore. Pretty speech, Reginald said. But the fact remains, you were rejected. The mate bond was severed. Accepting you as Luna means accepting that our Alpha King's first instinct about his mate was wrong. That he made a mistake. That's a dangerous admission for a leader. No, Stirling interjected. It means I'm secure enough to admit I made a mistake and wise enough to correct it. That's not weakness, Reginald. That's growth. And what happens when the Northern Packs object? Another council member, Agnes Fairfax, asked more gently. Lavinia may not want Archer, but the Hartford family will see this as an insult. We could jeopardize the entire alliance. The treaty doesn't depend on my marriage to Lavinia, Stirling said. We made sure of that when we dissolved the bond. The alliance stands regardless. And if the Hartfords object to my chosen bond with Moira, that's their problem, not ours. But, Agnes started. No, Stirling stood, his alpha presence filling the room. I've listened to everyone's concerns. I've considered the political implications. And here's my decision. I will bond with Moira Ashford. She will be Luna Queen. Not because she brings political advantage, but because she brings wisdom, compassion, and the kind of strength this pack desperately needs. The kind of strength that rebuilds instead of just defending. That includes instead of just protecting our own. That grows instead of just maintaining. You're making a mistake, Reginald said. Then it's my mistake to make. But I don't believe it is. I believe that 3 years ago, rejecting Moira was the mistake. And I believe that choosing her now, openly, deliberately, permanently, is the wisest thing I've ever done. The chamber fell silent. Then Elder Phyllis, who'd been sitting quietly in the corner, who I hadn't even known was on the council, began signing. Her weathered hands moved with authority, and I translated automatically. She says, I spoke for her, that she's been watching this pack for 70 years. That she's seen strong leaders and weak ones, wise counsels and foolish ones. And that the truest measure of strength is the ability to admit error and chart a better course. She says that Moira Ashford has already proven her value to this pack through her work with Archer. And that any council that can't see that is blind by choice, not by necessity. Several council members shifted uncomfortably. Phyllis continued signing. She's also reminding Elder Hawthorne that his own grandson, Wesley, wouldn't be speaking today if not for Moira's intervention 5 years ago. That seems relevant to this discussion. Reginald's face flushed. That's different. Is it? I asked quietly. You were grateful then. You told me I'd given your family a miracle. But now that gratitude is inconvenient, so you discard it. I'm thinking of the pack's future. So am I interrupted. I'm thinking of a pack where everyone has value, not just those born into the right families. Where gifts like communication and compassion matter as much as strength and strategy. Where a future Alpha King can be mute and still be respected because we've built systems that allow for difference. That's the future I want to help Stirling build. I turned to address the full council. I won't pretend I'm a perfect choice for Luna. I'll make mistakes. I'll need guidance. But I promise you this. I'll work harder than anyone to serve this pack well. I'll use every skill I have to strengthen our community. And I'll stand beside your Alpha King not as a political asset, but as a partner who challenges him to be better, who reminds him that duty includes compassion. Agnes Fairfax was the first to stand. I support this bonding. The Fairfax family owes a debt to Miss Ashford, and I believe she'll serve this pack admirably. One by one others stood. Not all. Reginald remained seated, as did 3 others. But 8 of 12 council members rose in support. It was enough. Stirling's face blazed with pride and relief. Then it settled. The bonding ceremony will be held at the next full moon. You're all invited to witness the beginning of a new era for the Thornwood pack. As the council dispersed, Stirling crossed to where I stood, still trembling slightly from the adrenaline of confrontation. That, he said softly, was the most magnificent thing I've ever witnessed. You were extraordinary. I was terrified. You were perfect. He took my hands. You spoke truth to power. You challenged their assumptions. You made them see you, really see you, instead of just their prejudices about Omegas and rejected mates. 8 out of 12 isn't unanimous. It's enough. More than enough. Moira, you won't just be my Luna. You'll be exactly the Luna this pack needs. Before I could respond, a small figure barreled into us. Archer, who'd apparently escaped his afternoon lessons to find us. Mom. Papa. He signed frantically, I heard. Everyone talking. You're going to be together. Officially. Forever. Yes, Stirling signed back. If that's okay with you. Archer's face split into the biggest smile I'd ever seen on him. He threw his arms around both of us, trying to hug us simultaneously. Then he did something completely unexpected. He spoke. Not just a word or two but full sentences. I want this. I want us to be a real family. I want Mom and Papa to stay together. Please. Please say yes. Please make it forever. The longest speech Archer had ever made. Clear, determined, and from the heart. I looked at Stirling over Archer's head, tears streaming down my face. Forever, I agreed. Forever, Stirling echoed. And Archer, satisfied, went back to signing. Good. Now can we go get honey cakes? This is celebration. We laughed, all of us, and went to get honey cakes. Because sometimes, after the grand speeches and political victories and life-changing decisions, what you need is something sweet to mark the moment. The full moon arrived with perfect clarity. No clouds, no mist, just brilliant silver light flooding the estate grounds. The ceremony was held in the ancient grove at the heart of Thornwood territory, a circle of oak trees that had witnessed bonding ceremonies for 300 years. The pack gathered in concentric circles around the center, hundreds of wolves dressed in their finest, bearing witness. I wore white, traditional for bondings, but the dress was my own design. Simple, elegant, with silver embroidery at the hem that Archer had helped choose. My hair was loose, flowers woven through it by Constance and the other household staff who'd spent hours helping me prepare. As I walked through the crowd toward the center circle, I saw faces I recognized. Elder Phyllis, signing beautiful, so beautiful as I passed. Agnes Fairfax, smiling with genuine warmth. Even Reginald Hawthorne, looking disapproving but present, which I supposed was something. And then I saw Stirling. He stood in the center of the grove, wearing formal Alpha regalia, deep black with silver embroidery matching mine, his dark hair gleaming in the moonlight. But it was his expression that stopped my breath. He looked at me like I was the moon itself, like I'd hung the stars, like I was everything. Archer stood beside him, wearing his own formal outfit, holding the ceremonial cords that would bind our hands during the ritual. He signed to me as I approached. "You're beautiful. Like magic. Like Mom should look." I knelt briefly to kiss his forehead before rising to face Stirling. The pack's elder priestess, Meredith Cromwell, stepped forward. She was Phyllis's younger sister, 90 years old and sharp as ever. "We gather under the full moon," she began in a voice that carried through the grove, "to witness a bonding most unusual. Not a mate bond, that was forged and broken by choices and duty, but a chosen bond, made freely, made deliberately, made with full knowledge of the cost and consequences." She turned to Stirling. "Stirling Blackwood, Alpha King of the Southern Territories. Do you choose this woman Moira Ashford to be your Luna, your partner, your equal in all things?" "I do," Stirling said. "With full heart and clear mind I choose her. Above duty, above politics, above everything but the welfare of our son. I choose her, and I will keep choosing her, every day for the rest of my life." Meredith turned to me. "Moira Ashford, do you choose this man Stirling Blackwood to be your alpha, your partner, your equal in all things?" I looked at Stirling, really looked at him. At the man who'd broken my heart and then spent months carefully rebuilding it. At the father who'd swallowed his pride and asked for help when his son needed it. At the leader who'd learned that strength included admitting mistakes. "I do," I said. "Not because fate decreed it, but because I choose it. I choose him, flawed, complicated, learning. I choose us, unconventional, rebuilt, real. I choose this life, this pack, this family we're making from broken pieces and second chances." "Then let your hands be bound," Meredith said. Archer stepped forward, very serious, carrying the ceremonial cords, silver and gold woven together. He handed them to Meredith, then signed to both of us. "Forever. You promised forever." "Forever," we promised simultaneously. Meredith wound the cords around our joined hands, speaking words older than any of us. "Bound by choice. Bound by witness. Bound by the moon and the pack and the love that makes families. What has been chosen here cannot be unchosen. What has been witnessed here cannot be unwoven. You are bonded. You are one. You are Luna and Alpha together." The pack howled, hundreds of voices rising in an ancient song of celebration and recognition. The sound rolled through the grove, through the forest, up to that perfect silver moon. And then Stirling kissed me, our hands still bound between us, and the world narrowed to just this. His mouth on mine, Archer's small hand gripping my dress, the pack's howling approval, the moonlight blessing us all. When we finally broke apart, Stirling kept our bound hands raised high. "I present to you," he called out, his voice carrying alpha command. "Luna Queen Moira Blackwood, my chosen mate, my partner, the mother of my son. Honor her as you honor me. Follow her as you follow me. She is pack now and forever. Luna, Luna, Luna." the pack chanted. Luna. Me. An Omega who'd been rejected and rebuilt and returned. Now standing at the center of everything, not by birth or politics, but by choice and love and the stubborn refusal to give up on hope. As the ceremony ended and festivities began, Archer tugged on both our hands. Now what? He signed. Now, Stirling said, signing and speaking simultaneously. We celebrate. We feast. We dance. We're a family officially. All three of us. Good, Archer signed. Then, speaking carefully. I love you. Both. Forever. Forever, we echoed, our family of three, held together not by fate or duty or obligation, but by the strongest force of all, chosen love. The nursery has new occupants now. Archer is 5.5, confident, verbal when he chooses to be, fluent in sign language that he teaches to everyone he meets. He started lessons in pack history and leadership, already showing signs of the alpha he'll someday become. But he's also gentle, empathetic, brilliant at reading people in ways that have nothing to do with speaking and everything to do with truly seeing them. The new occupants are twins. A girl and boy, 8 months old, born from the chosen bond instead of the mate bond. We named them Thora and Hamish. Old names, Australian names, to honor the heritage of the Thornwood pack. Thora is quiet, observant, with Stirling's dark hair and my eyes. Hamish is loud, joyful, with my lighter coloring and Stirling's intensity. Neither has shown any signs of being mute, but we've been teaching them sign language from birth anyway. Because communication should be accessible to everyone, regardless of ability. I'm standing in the nursery now, watching Archer sign a story to the twins while they watch his moving hands with fascination. He's patient with them, kind, already showing the makings of an excellent older brother. Stirling appears in the doorway, leaning against the frame with that expression he gets when he's watching our family, like he still can't quite believe this is his life. They're going to be signing before they're speaking, he observes. Would that be so bad? Challenge. Not at all. Just an observation. He crosses to me, wrapping his arms around my waist from behind, chin resting on my shoulder as we watch our children together. How was the council meeting? Productive. We approved funding for 3 new schools that will offer bilingual education, spoken and signed. Elder Hawthorne actually voted in favor. Miracles do happen. He apologized to me last week, did I tell you? For opposing our bonding. Said he was wrong, that the pack has never been stronger, that I've exceeded every expectation. I could have told him that 3 years ago. I turn in his arms, facing him. You did tell him that. He wasn't ready to listen. And now he sees what I see. A pack that's more inclusive, more compassionate, more willing to value all kinds of strength. Your popularity has never been higher, by the way. The regional Alpha Summit last month. 6 different packs asked about implementing our communication accessibility programs. Our programs, Stirling corrects. You designed them. I just provide political support. We're a team. We are. He kisses me softly. Best decision I ever made, choosing you. Second best decision. Choosing you again every day after. Sappy. I accuse, but I'm smiling. Mom. Papa. Archer calls, signing simultaneously. Come see. Hamish smiled at me. A real smile, not just gas. We crossed to examine this miracle. Hamish is indeed smiling, a gummy, drooling, perfect smile directed at his older brother. He loves you, I sign to Archer. Like I do. Like Papa does. Like Thora does. You're his favorite. I'm everyone's favorite. Archer signs with the confidence of a 5-year-old who knows he's loved. Later, after the twins are asleep and Archer is tucked into his own bed, no longer the nursery but a proper boys' room filled with books and toys and maps of the territories, Stirling and I retreat to our private chambers. They're the Alpha's traditional rooms, but I've made them ours. Books everywhere, comfortable furniture, windows overlooking the gardens, and on the mantel, a small wooden frame holding 2 objects. The first is the signet ring Stirling gave me the night of rejection. The second is a dried flower, One of the wildflowers from those early morning deliveries during our courtship. Reminders of where we started. Proof of how far we've come. Do you ever regret it? Stirling asks, seeing where I'm looking. That we don't have the mate bond. That this is chosen instead of fated. I consider the question honestly. Sometimes I wonder what it would have felt like. That instant, undeniable connection. That certainty. But no, I don't regret this. What we have is stronger because we built it. We chose each other with full knowledge of each other's flaws and failures. That's more powerful than any bond the moon goddess could have forged. I love you, he says simply. I love you too. Even though you rejected me. Even though you broke my heart. Even though the path here was harder than it had to be. Even though. Because of, I correct. Because all of that taught us what matters. Taught us how to fight for each other. Taught us that family isn't just about blood or bonds, but about showing up day after day, choosing love when it would be easier not to. He pulls me close, and we stand there in our chambers, listening to the sounds of the estate settling for the night. Somewhere in the distance, a wolf howls. Probably the evening patrol. Somewhere closer, I hear Constance directing the night staff. And somewhere in between, our 3 children sleep safely, surrounded by love. This is what I've built. What we've built together. Not the life I imagined that night in the moonlight dress at the lunar ceremony. That girl expected to be invisible, to serve quietly, to never dream of Alpha Kings and grand romances. But this girl, the woman I've become, learned that sometimes the cruelest rejections lead to the most beautiful discoveries. That being broken doesn't mean being beyond repair. That second chances are real if you're brave enough to take them. That speaking sign language to a mute child could change the trajectory of an entire pack. That one whispered word, Mom, could rewrite a destiny. I am Moira Blackwood, Luna Queen of the Southern Territories. Rejected Omega turned chosen mate. Teacher, mother, partner, leader. And this is my story. The story of how heartbreak became hope, how silence found its voice, and how the most powerful bonds aren't fated. They're forged day by day through the simple revolutionary act of choosing love. So that's my story. The story of rejection and redemption. Of a little boy who couldn't speak and the sign language that gave him voice. Of second chances and chosen bonds and the families we build from broken pieces. If you made it this far, thank you. Thank you for walking this journey with me, for believing that happy endings are possible even after devastating beginnings, for understanding that strength comes in unexpected forms, sometimes in small hands shaping words in the air, sometimes in the courage to try again after your heart's been shattered. Now I want to hear from you. Tell me the city you're watching from so that I can send you a hug, because if this story touched you, if you've ever felt rejected or invisible or like your gifts didn't matter, you deserve to know you're not alone. We're all out here, building our own second chance stories, creating our own unconventional families, choosing love even when it's complicated. And remember, sometimes the thing that looks like an ending is actually just the beginning of something better. Sometimes silence is waiting for the right language to speak. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply show up day after day and choose to keep trying. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being here. This is Moira Blackwood signing off, but never signing goodbye. 'Cause our stories, they're never really over. They just keep unfolding